really smart person. Can't remember her name. Chess.
The Board of Trustees to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will entertain public comment, and yes, Patty.
Hi, I'm Patty Patricia. I think you all know good things, but I was the last one to leave. But as you know, I'm here with legal voters as part of our observer corps, and Sydney Scalisi is going to be, Sydney Scalisi is on Beaver Street?
Yes.
At 82.
Yes.
Yes.
Right next to the mayor.
Yeah.
Yes.
But she's going to be being a substitute when it's needed, and so just here, I just want you to follow up to us.
Thank you so much, and welcome, League of Observer Corps. It's nice to have you. Al, you're just supposed to, for the record, it's Al Keck.
Al Keck, 3 Delaware Street.
Yeah.
And also the watershed inspector. I'm also the assessor of that. So they're open today. I'm just appealing to the board for the next representative from the village of Cooperstown to be a trustee, if possible. And the second thing, that the various towns who has representatives on the Watershed Supervisory Committee nominate board members from their towns to be their representatives on the Watershed Supervisory Committee. And number 3, that if you do reach any decisions about charging money for inspections, that Mike Stocking, who inspects the advanced treatment unit, also be included in those discussions, and some kind of compensation be awarded to him for his inspections of the advanced treatment units. If we're going to charge for the other inspections, I think his inspections should also be compensated for.
Question?
Yes.
Al, what are the advanced treatment units?
Those are units that use oxygen to treat the effluent, and they're maintained, they used to be maintained, they were originally installed by Robbie Mulligan. In most cases, they're called multi-flows, but there are also other ones called Nidex. And when the people had them installed, they usually had a 3-year automatic contract for maintenance with the installer, which involved checking it out, making sure the pumps were working, the aerators were working, making sure that the filters were working, cleaning them if needed, and also recommending a pump out of the unit itself if needed. When Robbie Mulligan died, Mike Stocking took over all of his
Portfolio.
contracts. So now he's in charge of that.
Are these units for multiple dwellings or just single dwellings?
I would say maybe a couple of them are for two dwellings, but most, I would say 90% of them are for single dwellings.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Joe?
thank you. I'm curious, what is the basis for your recommendation for board members to be appointed to the supervisory committee? What's your thinking of that?
Oversight, number one. Particularly now, since more monies are being involved to fund the Watershed Supervisory Committee, and I think it would be wise to have representation from the towns that are being asked to fund to be on the board to see how the monies are being spent and recommendations for spending.
And then I have one technical question on these advanced treatments. If they don't work, is the particular septic system performing worse than if it didn't have them at all? Or is it just not getting the added advantage of a functioning advanced treatment?
Good question. I haven't, they've been maintained so well that I've never really had an instance where they didn't work. I've had instances where there have been events for certain size fields and units, and the events involved a whole lot more people than originally sized for the system, and I've had field outbreak on those occasions, but I've never had the actual multi-floor, an IADEC breakdown.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm just wondering about Mike Stocking's relationship to this whole thing. Is he doing this out of the goodness of his heart, or is he contracted with the owners?
He contracts with the owners.
So he contracts with the owners, but he is not compensated for the work that he is doing by the owners?
He is, but he's not compensated for sending us,
For the
what the
report?
watershed committee
for
has
the
asked
report
for
that
him
goes
to
the
send
village.
a
Okay,
report on a maintenance form that they asked me to develop.
okay, got it,
So it's the report that he would like.
Yeah.
yeah,
Compensation for.
understood,
Well,
thank you.
to follow up on that, if I may, do you have a sense of a fee schedule, or we're not there yet?
I have no, I mean, I really don't, to be honest with you.
Any more questions, Ron? No? Thank you, Alan. We appreciate all you do on the
Absolutely.
watershed inspector. Any other public comment? No. All right, we're going to move on. We do have a public hearing tonight on our Fowler lot EV. And that will be opened at 7. We have a review of the minutes. I know Cindy sent one. I know Joe sent a correction. I sent a couple. So if there were no others that you want to bring up now, a motion to accept the minutes of our July 24th meeting with the corrections submitted by George, second by Joe. All in favor?
Aye.
It says none for permits, but you'll see on your additional agenda, we have the Cooperstown Art Association application to use village property. This would be a food truck or fine arts on the lawn.
We already approved the event, they're just asking now to have a food truck available and want to use village parking spots.
One of the, on Fair Street.
Yes.
Yep,
I'll make a motion to approve that permit.
by Cindy, second by Sydney, all in favor. We have a zoning officials report. And we were emailed separately the ZBA and HPARB minutes. Again, there was no planning board meeting as there were no materials to review. Any questions or on that? If not, motion to accept the zoning officer's report.
Do you want a motion to?
And then we'll
Okay.
do the
Alright.
changes.
Motion to accept the zoning officer's
And then
report.
second by Sydney, all in favor?
Right.
But we do have zoning law changes, and they were next to that in your packet. And Cindy, do you want to go over this?
Yeah, so this is the fourth in a series of zoning law changes. The action tonight would be to send this to the planning board as well as the county planning department for their review. The changes that you see were directly influenced by the public comment that we have heard over the past several months. The biggest change has to do with how we establish who can be an owner-operator of a short-term rental. Previously, the stipulation was one had to be a long-term resident, which meant 30 days plus. This goes much further than that in terms of stipulating that an owner-operator needs to have their domicile at the address where they are applying for a short-term rental. Domicile is a legal term. It goes beyond just residency. Someone can have multiple residences, but only one domicile. That's where you pay your taxes, if you get social security benefits, they come there, you register vehicles, animals, that sort of thing.
That was actually always the intent, we just didn't have the proper language, correct?
I don't think that it had come to a head quite the way it has of late, but yes, the intent was always that a short-term rental operator would be an individual who had a long-term commitment to the village and to their property. It's just that we define long-term as 30 days, which isn't very long.
Are there any questions or comments about this?
So I'll make a motion to forward these changes to the Village of Cooperstown Planning Board for their recommendation and to the Otsego County Planning Department for their review.
And did you want to set a public hearing for them? Because we could get those recommendations back prior to our September meeting.
Well, I feel like the planning board has 4 pretty substantial laws to review, and they only meet a week prior to our meeting, so I'm not sure we want to put that much pressure on
We
our.
haven't met in 2 months.
I know. But I don't want them to feel that they're being like pushed to do this on a
But we can wait.
But I sort of, agree with that direction because of, this may come to a head at any point, especially after this goes public. I think we should move on this one. I think Gene can handle it.
I mean, he's got 4 big ones.
Gene can handle it.
Would you like to make it part of your motion?
No, I would prefer to hold off till we get recommendations back in case we need to tweak things again before going to the public hearing.
Is there a second? Is it?
No. Is there a second
I'll
to
second
that? I was seeing if it was going to change. So are the other ones expected back at all? They will be, so they'll be meeting, they'll do those 3 is what you're saying. You just want to give a 4.
Well, I think they'll do all 4, and I think it's helpful that they look at them in concert. I just don't know that they want to spend 5 hours together, and I think that it could
Be
take
that
that
long.
long.
Perfect. All right, motion made. This will be, it's just send to the planning board and the county planning board for their recommendations. Seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
And moving on, we have Public Safety Committee.
We made our way through August pretty well, I think. Certainly things quieted down significantly. And a couple of notable incidents that are not included in the report I prepared. It was an incident at Chestnut and West Beaver. It was an pedestrian is a white male, 64, and driver actually ran over the pedestrian's foot, claimed she didn't see him. Victim was transported to Bassett Hospital and was later released with minor injuries. Second incident was apparently we had a fatality up at the Nettie Bumpo Trail. 61-year-old doctor fell. Our police officers weren't involved with the rescue. We were assisted by the sheriffs and the park rangers. Unfortunately, this victim succumbed to his injuries, and he was a doctor here at the hospital. The other thing of note, that we have is I got together with the chief on Friday, August 25th, and we reached out to each of the 4 vendors that had come to basically do a site survey for the cameras. RCR, County Home Security, ZS Security, and Sentry. Calls were made. As far as I know, we've only gotten one response, which was basically, we're gonna follow up with you. It's on the agenda, but we haven't gotten anything from 3 of the vendors. We'll be calling again this week just to continue with that type of follow-up. And then perhaps, reach out further to see if somebody might be really interested in the task.
George, we did, that's one of the reasons why, we did finally get one today at like 4:30.
Oh,
So I can make copies for everybody.
All right.
Or
We can
forward
get one
to you
today at
in the
4:30.
email.
All right, if you could make copies for everyone. Everybody should be aware, the chief is looking to see if we can hire an additional full-time police officer. Again, we should have some discussion regarding that sometime in the future. I'd also like to see if we can look to readjust the schedule a little bit. If you look at the police schedule, we're heavy on Wednesdays, light on the weekends, and perhaps during the summer months, maybe look to extend tours into the wee hours with an eye towards making, engaging in DWI enforcement, which I think might be important for the village. And we had on the list of activity, 73 calls for the month. There were quite a few parking tickets written once again. We had one incident of vandalism at Pioneer Park, minor damage to a sign. Other than that, the month was pretty fairly quiet.
Are comments apropos at this point?
The question relative to the
Comment
yeah.
relative to
Yeah.
what he said.
Yeah.
Regarding the cameras, I've sort of come to the conclusion that if we go with 4 cameras should be facing Doubleday parking lot and Doubleday field rather than the boats. I think it's more important to protect people than it is to protect property in this situation, especially that type of private property. 2, no, I'm gonna lose it. All right. Oh, if we do add a 4th officer, I'm very much in favor, another full-time officer, I'm very much in favor of it in principle, but I would have to know that absolutely none of those extra hours are going to be overlap hours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I would like to add to the Doubleday comment that we've talked about in the committee, that the committee is very interested in adding security cameras inside the grandstand. And maybe we could look at the parking lot. I was kind of holding off until the next budget cycle.
Well, in any event, I think
Yeah.
it's more important there to protect people than worrying, I hate to say it, than worrying about private boats. So, but, that's just a matter, anywhere that it protects people is more important to me.
Joe, did you have another
Yeah,
question?
I did, and I was waiting for the chief to come back, but here he is. I guess the problem we've been having is, we've been hearing is the vendors are not being that responsive, and the information we're getting is quite costly products. And one of my main concerns is protecting the library. I think we started out with security cameras in response to the incidents at the library, and that seems to be a relatively confined need, but and able to be implemented much more readily than these outdoor cameras. And yet, we've spoken with these vendors about packaging up both the library project and the outdoor cameras, and then the outdoor camera project is lagging, and we're not solving the real problem we have with the library. So is there a way, I know the library is in a way independent of us, But if there's a way of solving that problem with the installation of a much simpler camera system that satisfies the need proposal,
I know the
then for
library,
this.
Is applying for another
yeah,
grant.
based on what
Yes.
the library has reported at Buildings Committee, they are also sort of in a holding phase while they seek funding.
Right, but even at that, they have been looking and have not had much success in getting vendors to be responsive, if I'm understanding you correctly. So getting the grant is one thing, getting the installation and service is another.
I wasn't aware of that, but it could very well be true.
Yeah.
I spoke to Heather earlier in the week, and she hadn't heard anything from any of the vendors as well up to that point. That may have changed today.
Right, and she had been the one to arrange a lot of these, at least initially, to start bringing in vendors to talk, so.
Well, I know it's hard because we've just been handed this, so is this one quote we've gotten, or?
That's just the one company, the one
The one
quote. One
company.
thing when we spoke to them the one day with George, they didn't know that we were interested. They initially just went with the library. So that's the one I guess George was talking about, that they thought we were gonna follow up with them. When we reached out on Friday, they said, oh, we're waiting for you to reach out. But they came right away today, looked at everything and got the quote out to us today, so.
Okay, so we have one quote thus far, but we're gonna try and seek several quotes.
Yeah, we're gonna follow up.
Okay. All right, so are there any other questions on the police report or these? If not, can we then do the fire and EMS?
Just give me 1 second to read through my file here. Sydney and I met with the fire chief and Glenn Falk on Wednesday, August 16th. Year-to-date, fire department has responded to 124 calls. No major incidents either within the village or in the adjoining communities that we serve. The department's ladder truck remains out of service. The main cylinder that serves to operate the vehicle's outriggers is leaking, and there's no anticipated date for its return to service.
It is back in service.
I'm sorry,
It is now back in service.
it's back in service? Oh, wow,
Friday.
wow.
Some time for the clamping.
The water meter on rescue pumper 0212 has failed, and apparently it's a critical piece of equipment, especially if you're sending firefighters into a building or a residence and all that, because we don't know how much water's in the truck. So, Mike Simons wasn't around for the meeting, but he sent a very detailed report for us. There were 85 EMS calls during July. Cooperstown responded to 70 with at least a partial crew. 24 of those calls were within the village, 16 in the town of Otsego, 7 in Middlefield, and 19 in the town of Springfield.
Wow.
There were 12 responses to the helipad, and the unit provided over 40 hours of standby coverage during the course of the Hall of Fame weekend. And during that, the Department of Health Bureau of EMS was kind enough to conduct an inspection of our setup there, and according to Mike, we had a glowing approval of the way the operation was set up. And that's basically it, unless you have some questions.
Does this indicate that not having EMS service of its own right now? Okay, thanks.
I just have one thing to add to the fire committee. They did talk about interest in if there's an SUV that is retired from the police or from the village, possibly utilizing one of those in the future, because they have had some, they feel that their other SUV that they're using for sort of like shutting down streets isn't exactly super safe because it doesn't have the right lights on it.
Who's
and
this that wants this?
The fire department,
Oh,
and that was just something that they had mentioned.
Joan?
I'm struck by the third paragraph of your report where it says in the second sentence, a high percentage, approximately 50% of these calls were determined to be unfounded. The mobilization of the fire department personnel and equipment it's just a huge undertaking. It's incredibly disruptive to their lives. How do we account for and how do we mitigate this high level of calls that are unfounded? It's kind of a strange word. Maybe that requires explanation, but it means that they didn't need to go.
So they did talk about a couple of things. I think we mentioned how in some other municipalities for false alarms, if it's over a certain amount of times for an individual or household, there's a fine. I do think that in addition to some of them being unfounded, like they didn't need to show up, like totally false alarm, there were a number that they were saying are, someone forgets their food on the stove. And it's absolutely a reason to come out because that is a fire waiting to, it's sending the smoke alarm off and all that. But that was their highest reason for going out, is someone forgetting that they had been cooking today.
they said that a smoke alarm was unfounded?
No, I was saying that there were a number.
Yeah, a number of
reasons.
those.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get at, and Richard is trying to get at the same thing. How do we classify these unfounded? And then is there anything we can do to mitigate
So
that number?
they're automatic alarms. So if your smoke system is hooked up to an alarm system that automatically dials 911, so if it's burnt toast.
And they're not located here locally.
Right.
It's it alerts a system that could be, anywhere.
So that's, then I missed your point. So you're talking about there can be a fine system, or what were you suggesting?
I think it was brought up that there is something in place where if you have multiple false alarms or unfounded calls in one household, then there's a fine.
We have it in place, Joe. You said it's just for Bassett, though.
Well, no, I
Bassett
can tell you
triggers it a lot.
because I hear the
Yeah.
scanner that it's
But
off of
you
Bassett.
can, on automatic alarms, if there is a significant number of false alarms, usually attributable to the mechanism not working quite properly, there's a fine structure in place, and we can impose that. So just so you know, there is a mechanism. I don't know what the mechanism is when you get someone, and I know 2 of those calls at least were an individual who is elderly and confused, but sufficiently cognizant enough to live on their own. And they call in with issues. So I don't know how we deal with them.
Some of them, Judge, and it's a small amount, we're gonna be there first. Some of them we can mitigate. If we go in and there's the woman, oh yeah, I burnt my toast, and I know that's definitely the case, or one of us. But if we don't know, or no one's answering the door, we don't wanna take it upon ourselves to say, it's okay, don't come. So it is, I understand what you're saying, but it is a difficult thing. Like we had one at the school where it was a witness, the kid pulled the fire alarm. I can call and say, we have a witness that saw the kid pull the fire alarm, but if we don't have that, we're still gonna have them come out.
You're not talking about somebody in good faith responding to an internal smoke alarm in their home who's present, or other things. Because I've responded to the smell of smoke by itself. And of course, I called Glenn to come, and he came.
No, but I think Martin's talking, Cindy, about a different situation where nobody's there and these systems.
That's one of the bigger
Do a
problems.
product
Yeah.
liability case, maybe a class action for all fire departments in the United States. Martin. It'll be on easy.
Good idea.
It seems like we have something for police ones, but I'm not seeing one for fire. Yeah. False alarms and charges, any owner or lessee of property having a police alarm device or system of police alarm devices on its premises, on the blah, 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 shall pay to the village clerk a charge for each false alarm to which the police department responds in each calendar year as set by the Board of Trustees. This negates alarms caused by power failures, electrical storms, or telephone line trouble. Those are accepted. So there is one
Cover
for,
fire, I'm surprised.
it's the only one that popped up was for police.
In many jurisdictions, these types of laws evolve because you have a business, 16, 17 entry alarms. And then all of a sudden there would be a no response list until they can prove that their alarm system had been repaired.
I'm not sure our insurance would,
Is it possible to get incident reports that detail what happened, including the identification of the kind of equipment and models that were used, just so we can develop some statistics about that, and then we know what we're.
And he can sue the companies.
your recollection is we did try to do one and it wasn't approved?
No.
Oh,
No, I was mouthing Bassett is probably the
The large,
most
yeah.
often, wouldn't you
Yeah.
say, alarm that goes off, and it's important.
I disagree. When I sat over there in the
Yeah.
public safety chair, it
Yeah.
was the wax museum. And they didn't have an exterior, a lot of them had the lock boxes that
Yeah,
you can then get into.
I think they have resolved their.
Oh, they did, but I think that it's not, we can't blame just
No,
one.
and I'm not
element.
blaming them, and I do think if at a hospital, a fire alarm goes off, it's important that
To
there is
everybody respond.
a
Have to
response.
Yeah, and it was, I will say, in the conversation that we were having at the fire committee meeting, it was brought up that there's a lot that were unfounded or false alarms or whatnot. And while we did talk about fining, it seemed like it was, the chiefs and the lieutenants sort of feeling that it's important that they're going out, even if
Okay,
it's,
so they weren't particularly.
No, but it might be worth us at the next fire committee meeting talking about how there's a law in place for, or a fine in
Police.
place for police and whether we wanna extend that to fire or not.
Probably the first step would be to catalog these incidents.
Yeah.
So that we have a record. Again, we'll make it a point to reach out to the chief on that issue.
And maybe we could do a Village Voices notice about inspecting your alarm systems and making sure they're up to snuff. They contribute to false alarms.
I will note that actually 50% false alarm rate is probably low compared to urban areas.
I have no idea. That's why we don't have statistics.
Yeah, good to know. Or any other
That's an issue
questions?
with many fire departments.
I have one, I know we respond quite a bit to the helipad, and it was my understanding that an arrangement was made with, would it be, the medevac helicopter service, or?
Yes, what had happened was it was discovered that the medevac was getting paid for delivering the patient to the hospital or picking a patient up at the hospital. And so communications went back and forth, and they acknowledged that they weren't rendering that service, they were just doing the flight. And so they are now, we entered into a contract with them. I did that, I would say, 7 months ago, whereby they're paying, and it's a fair sum. It's like $120, $30 every time we have to go to the helipad that goes to the squad.
We know if we've got.
Can you ascertain
Well,
if,
Ellen just asked me, are we getting it? We should. I'm sure the
can
guys
you
would have been
ascertain
in
if
my
that
office
is
if we weren't.
occurring?
It was a contractual arrangement
I
because
think that
the
they're,
helicopter was getting at that company.
There have been a lot of helipad, as the
oh,
report
100%.
indicates, a lot of helipad calls.
So is the outcome of this that the helicopter company was getting paid by insurers or the state or somebody for something they didn't do?
Yep.
Can that be clawed back?
Well, at this point, they acknowledged that we were providing that service, so we're receiving it. The emergency squad is receiving it, so when the fellows respond,
There needs to be.
they're
record
getting,
of that.
they're getting
Right.
paid.
But up to this point, A lot of
guess
that-
that's up to
happened when we paid
that's up to
ourselves.
we weren't entitled to it at that point. It was just acknowledged since they were receiving pay for something they didn't do. And we were in
It wasn't that they
actuality,
were, yeah, we were always doing the transport,
Exactly.
but they were
They were getting
being,
paid.
yeah.
yep, and so we went back 4 months, I think, to the beginning of the year. It may in fact be this year, because it may have been like in April or so, we did the contract with them. They acknowledged, in fact, it wasn't just us, they acknowledged it with a number of service providers like our EMS, that it had happened all over, and so they agreed to the money they were receiving for the purported transport of the patient from the hospital to the helipad, or from the helipad to the hospital. Now that portion is paid over to the village EMS.
But I think what Joe is asking is, that billing should never have been done, especially since many of these are for Medicare and Medicaid. So actually, by Medicare's standards, that's Medicare fraud.
That we're getting into the weeds. All I want is
I
that
want the
the
money from
committee
places. Money
ascertain,
from before.
have those funds been secured, and where are they? Thank you. Are there any other questions on public safety? No? Motion to accept the Public Safety Committee report by Hannah, second by Sydney. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm now going to go back and open the public hearing on proposed local law number 4 of 2023 to amend chapter 270-14D, parking reserved in designated locations, by designating 4 year-round spaces for electric vehicle charging in Fowler Way parking lot. I don't know if we don't seem to have anyone from the public to speak about that. Would you like to address it, Cindy?
Yeah, I'll just say this is potentially the first step toward installing EV charging stations in the Fowler Way lot. These would be fast chargers, a significant improvement over the chargers that we currently have in the Doubleday Field lot. And sort of the first step was to ensure that there was not public opposition to, ideally public support of, EV chargers within the Fowler Way lot. Depending on the outcome of this, we will go back to ChargePoint and let them know, and the next step is to further review a contract. ChargePoint they're in a really unique situation in that they have money through NYSERDA to install EV chargers at 20 locations throughout the state of New York. They are trying to fill gaps. So, I should make it clear that even if we do this, this doesn't automatically mean that there will be EV chargers there in the next 4 months. There may be EV chargers there in the next 4 months, but the idea was to ensure that there was public support and board support for this installation.
So,
I don't know if you qualify as member of the public. I'm gonna let Joe go first, and then I'll let you.
no, I'll wait, this is a hearing portion, I just want to get some questions later on about how.
Okay. Terrell?
So, and I know this question will come up with people that are trying to look for charging stations and stuff. So if we put it in a Fowler Way lot, what are gonna be the stipulations for people to charge their cars there? Are they gonna have to get a village parking?
No,
permit?
and that is delineated in our draft law. It's essentially in Fowler Way designating 4 spaces on the east side of the northernmost area. And that area was selected because these fast chargers had very large facility things, what are they, transformers?
They're batteries.
Batteries, basically, these 2 large units that stand there, and they had to be near a transformer power line, and that has direct access to one that's located on basically the Doubleday Court Road. So that seemed an optimal place. what should be noted on these, they would not need the parking permit, and that is outlined in this law revision. But interestingly, these fast chargers, as opposed to our double day ones, which are slow chargers because we put them in to avoid demand charges. And we know people who have utilized them and had their car there for like 12 hours and it still didn't charge up. These fast chargers are very fast, and it's so regulated that you would charge your car theoretically easily within 30 minutes. It could be 20 minutes. And if you leave your car parked in a EV fast charging spot, you are then, the company then charges you because they want you out of there so they can get another EV vehicle in. So it would be kind of a turnover for those 4 EV charging ones. But I think it's key to our, the village of Cooperstown. We were very early in putting in the first EV chargers, and this is really the way to go with these fast chargers. This is a boon to the village because we can, essentially, this program pays for the electric. And even now, the ones that we have, our slow chargers, run us about $2,000, $2,500 a year of the cost that we have to pay just to have that service available. So that's why this is actually a great program. So hopefully they'll look positively on us and cite them there. But if not, I think this is an important step to having a location in downtown Cooperstown recognized for this.
You are right, Terrell, that we will have to improve the signage. You know that the sign has long needed replacement due to some unfortunate incidents. So that would be the one cost to the village, would be updating our signage to make it clear.
And maybe possible street markings or ground markings.
A related question, if this will be coming up, this Passero Engineering and Architecture for the Farley passage, should that attribute of our parking or way be factored into their design exercise?
I think they will need to be aware of it. That's really for the road part as opposed to the parking lot
No,
part.
understood.
But yeah, they should definitely know that this is a potential service available there.
We had some discussion as how we were gonna divide the parking lots there. Has anything further been determined as to how that's gonna be done?
In terms of where buses go and where campers go and.
Yeah, we were talking about maybe a wooden fence or.
Oh, yeah, there is the expectation when we budget that a wooden guardrail can be installed between the village-owned parking lot and the privately owned parking lot that is immediately adjacent to avoid some ticketing issues.
Yeah, if you go there now, you'll notice that temporarily we have like sawhorse dividers up. It was found that that our wonderful parking enforcement officers doing their duty were, but unfortunately there were people putting their $10 fee in the private lot and coming and parking in ours, but then of course they didn't have the permit, so that they could show proof of payments and things like that, so they had to be negated. So we felt we had to take some quick action, so we weren't continuing to penalize people for a very understandable confusion between the lots. Any other questions or comments on this? No? I will entertain a motion then to, for the establishment of the EV charging parking spaces in Fowler Way.
If you want to close the
Carla, I better close it? No one can, so there you go. Close. But I will entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second that motion.
Second by Richard, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on, we have Doubleday Advisory Committee.
So the biggest thing of note was that the application to use the field I did not see a very thorough email from Joe, so I apologize about that. But I'm wondering, it doesn't go out till October, so would it make sense to look at Joe's commentary on all of it and reassess at the September meeting?
I hate to run it too late, so you had a lot of comments on it, Joe?
Yeah, about a week and a half, on the 15th, Hannah circulated it, and I wrote to her and said I would get her something within a couple of days, and I actually did. I spent a considerable amount of time editing and organizing and adding substantively, and I sent it to her, and then I didn't follow up when I didn't hear back from her. So she has it,
Okay.
but we're just,
Is it possible to circulate that so that we're not waiting and seeing kind of the finished document at our September meeting and then want to tweak it? Because it does go out like October 4th, so we really need to fine tune it before then.
and I'm willing to sit down anytime between now and then if you want to discuss anything about it.
Yeah, definitely. I'll dive into that, and then I'd love to chat with you more about it, Joe, and probably should
Can
bring it
you
back to the
send
committee.
us what you did?
I'm gonna
She's
forward
just
it
doing
right
it
now.
She just
Okay, so
forwarded
we'll
it.
get that.
Yeah, it'd be great for everybody to see. I just wanted the reason I sent it first to Hannah was because we had enough time. I just thought, rather than create a lot of confusion, I would see if I was totally off base in what I was proposing, and then Hannah could take the pen.
But then we can look at, the changes that were proposed and Joe's suggestion in one document. And then I think it's important to sort of, if it looks like it's going to be not something we can tackle and quickly resolve in September, we can maybe even have a little working meeting or something to resolve it.
Well, and so my other thought was, if we want to do like part of the changes for this year, and if Joe has some intense notes here that if we need to follow into next season, it can be just continued updated, but.
Are your changes editorial or are they?
Or
Editorial, substantive, organizational, they're all.
Okay, so
They're
there are
all of them.
substitutes.
I mean, they're proposed. I defer to the group, but I just wanted to contribute those thoughts.
Our trustee meeting in September is the 25th, so that's a week before that document would have to go out. So why don't we send it around a bit, because this is really kind of committee work, see what we come up with, and hopefully can settle on something for a vote in September at the 25th.
Yeah. I know the committee was good with the changes that were
Already
made,
they're on there.
but I would love to look at Joe's notes and dive into that. I'm not sure if there was anything else of note, except for I would like to enter into executive session to discuss contract at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I put it on there.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on Doubleday Committee? No. Motion to accept the Doubleday Field Committee report by Joe, second by George, all in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to streets.
Yeah, so, some action items from the streets committee, but first, on page 1, under streets and sidewalks, at the July breakfast with the board, a resident of the Chestnut Lake intersection area had made a suggestion that intersection may be better as a three-way stop as opposed to a one-way stop with Lake Street through. Given the fact that the streets committee has at almost every meeting this year talked about problems at that intersection, either pedestrian or vehicular, this seemed like a good idea to pursue. So I would like to make a motion to set a public hearing for the September board meeting to consider the addition of a stop on Lake Street coming both east and west at Chestnut Street.
Second.
Second by Hannah, all in favor?
Aye.
Under trolley, we discussed a number of things. The first is the fact that the 5-year contract with Leatherstocking Trolley would be up this year. It is actually only the 4th year of the contract because we had a lost season due to COVID. After discussion with the county, who is actually the contracting body, so we can only make a recommendation. Our committee's recommendation was to exercise the clause that allows for a 1-year extension of that contract. That recommendation comes with 2 thoughts in mind. The first is there are not very many potential bidders in our area, and based on the county's experience with its other transportation systems, it is likely we will only get 1 response if we go back out to RFP. The second concern is that given labor prices as well as gas prices at this point in time, if we go out again, it is likely that we will see significantly higher prices than what we could get if we exercise the right to extend the contract. So my motion is to make a recommendation to the county that they extend their contract with Leatherstocking Trolley for an additional year.
Second.
Second by Richard. Is this the first year we've done that? I feel like I went online to that online, because all their contracts are online in order to sign that contract. And I wouldn't have said it was 4 years ago even, that we discounted a year. What year, do we know what year we're on that?
It is the 5th year if you count 2020.
And they are or not?
They are.
They are.
Yeah,
So
they're
this
doing
would
it
be
by
the
calendar year.
first of
Extension.
Which is correct.
extension with a maximum of 2 allowed. So we could go essentially 2 more years.
We could,
We
yeah, so
could.
this would just
Okay.
be for the 2024
Yeah.
season.
All right, so the motion was made, seconded. Were there any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
The next bullet point on the trolley has to do with the Savannah Bananas game. So the trolley service stops as of Sunday, September 3rd, the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. We knew that the Hall of Fame had previously made a request to have service on the 16th, and that's what we discussed at our meeting. Since that time, the Hall of Fame has requested trolley service on the 16th, as well as the 15th, and in the event of rain, on the 17th. So we will need to update a number of websites to indicate that during that period, the plan is to charge $5 per person cash. So when we turn off our kiosks, they will remain off, and people will need to use cash. Given the fact that Doubleday Field is sold out for that event and that Doubleday Field parking lot will be closed, it does seem that there could be considerable use of the trolley that weekend. So that's more of an update than anything else. Let's see, other things. There has been discussion, a lot of discussion about Fish Road and parking on Fish Road. This is on the bottom of page 2. So there is, you should have among your supplemental materials for this evening, a potential change. When we first began to consider eliminating boat trailer parking from some of the parking areas, the idea was to allow both trailers on the east side closest to the lake. We did that, we passed that law, we signed it, we got numerous complaints. And we got complaints from boat owners for 2 reasons. One, if you're driving an automobile, you probably want to park close to the lake. So there were a lot of cars using those spaces. But also, there's not a lot of maneuvering room down there. And if you're not strong enough to manually move your boat trailer out and hook it up to your hitch, it can be difficult to do. So the suggestion we got from users was to move those boat trailer parking spaces up across from the boat wash, where there's a little bit more room, So that's what this does. The sentence that is changing under now proposed is toward the end of that paragraph, and it reads, from the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day, boat trailer parking is not permitted on the west side of Fish Road or in the 16 northernmost parking spaces on the east side of Fish Road. So that is the change.
I will say that today I was trying to look at the signage. I was in this pouring rain, so I went down to the lot and there was no one. There was not a single vehicle there except one pickup truck,
Yeah.
two fellows, and one fellow was absolutely mystified by the signage. And
Really?
we were finally talking to him. He said he didn't know whether he could park. It was just interesting, and I was puzzled reading the signs, having this one, because I went down there to
Well,
look
I
at
will
things,
say,
so-
what we did with the signs is that before we passed this, we didn't want to invest in new signs. So we just painted out and
I saw
amended
some of
the
that.
arrows. So we can sign it better by
I
next
think
year.
we finally landed on what is good. We had no public comment on that, as I recall at our.
Right, yeah, and then the public comment clearly came after the signs went
Yeah.
up.
I will also say that having, gone and parked in Fish Road this season, it has been so much easier to find parking when we're going out on the boat than it has been previously, so it's.
Yeah, I think it was.
I wonder why that would be, because nothing would have changed there, other than, but you're saying there were more than 7 trailers, sometimes there'd be 15 trailers.
Oh, well,
Oh,
because,
easily.
yeah,
So that's what you're
Yeah.
saying.
And it is correct to say that trailers may be parked up at the peripheral lots?
Right.
Which is what I told this fellow.
Cindy, I know the original thing, it was gonna be 8 spots for trailers, there's only 6 now, is that gonna stay that way?
So I think there's 7 as I count it on Monday through Friday. And then presumably the way this is worded, the village official spots, when they are not village official spots on Saturday and Sunday and into the evening, could be used by boat trailers. I have definitely seen them used that way. So people interpret that they can park there, which probably makes sense, right? Whether it's 6
We don't, on the weekends, we don't write anybody using those spots. Monday through Friday, if you're in the village
Right.
spots, we write. On the weekends, we don't, but I think, like Joe said, I think it's gotta be
it's gotta be better
clarified a
signed.
little bit better.
Yeah.
Because even the way you have that one that you count as 7, I'm like,
Yeah, I know.
is it 7 or is it the hour there, so.
Somebody did stop me personally and said, can I park here? Because the sign's in the middle of the parking space. So, yeah, no, we need to work on the signs, clearly.
but it definitely has been a really great change.
I also consider pavement markings, so that it would say vehicle trailers only in some spots, and
I would not want to put extra painting
Because it changes.
on our DPW. They have enough trouble getting crosswalks done to stencil words on the.
All right, so we will hear the proposed, we're basically just moving the trailer parking from the northern end to the more southern end, and that way just switching that. And the signage will definitely be addressed. So is there a motion by Sydney, second by Cindy?
Everybody.
All in favor?
And then the one other thing I have, this is going back several months now, but we've been looking at fines in both public safety and in streets. We neglected last month when we had the public hearing to actually include them in the packet, so this month you have them in the packet.
I may point out there's a typo.
Oh, where is there a typo?
I called it in earlier. It's not fees, it's fines. They're not parking fees, they're parking fines.
Can we take it?
I mean, I don't want to spend $100 every time I phone.
You should, if you park in a police parking spot.
I had a question for you, Cindy.
Yeah,
regarding Savannah Bananas weekend. Are there gonna be signs going up saying no parking along many of the village streets like we do have over Hall of Fame weekend?
you know, that's a great question.
And I have a follow-up question to
Yeah.
that.
So you're saying, would there be, you know,
I don't want people parking in my lawn, unless they pay me for it. And that was the second question. Could we pass an emergency law based on the fact there's not gonna be adequate parking that week, allowing people to allow parking on their personal property that weekend?
I think we declared a special event.
Is it, if
didn't
it
we?
is a special
it's
event?
already a special
Oh, but
event,
does that,
so
does
they
that allow,
could, they have to
any special
apply.
event allows people to charge for parking?
Yeah,
They have to apply for it,
you have to
though.
pay your $25. On your first question, I'll defer to the chief, because you've been attending the meetings about Savannah Bananas. There's no road closures, is there any? I haven't heard any.
No.
I
No,
think you,
they sold 6,500 tickets is what was sold.
63 some,
Yeah,
yeah, basically 65.
But then somebody told me there's something going on at the Farmers Museum too, and then we just had somebody come in today asking about an estate sale at 83 Lake that weekend, so, I mean, it's definitely gonna be.
So if there is an event at the Farmers Museum, then state DOT usually posts, or we usually post no parking on Route 80.
Yeah, DOT does most of that,
Yeah.
so they don't get it parking on those signs.
Yeah, we have a meeting on Thursday, so I could reach out with an email to everybody. That's our final meeting for it. So I'll let you know if anything
Mhm.
changed or.
I think that, you know, essentially, we should make that, we probably should make that known, that if people want to park vehicles, they need to apply for submit their $25 application. I think we have a good sense from the last Hall of Fame induction, that where the number was not large.
I think they're gonna fit.
What?
I think the parked cars are gonna fit.
Oh,
on streets.
100%, because even in that, which would be double the number that they're gonna expect, you know, they've sold tickets for, that double at the Hall of Fame. There were people on Chestnut Street and, you know, Upper Main, begging for cars. Their lots were empty. So I really, you know, they certainly can put their $25 in and try, but I think there's more than enough parking. And particularly if we leave it where it is, we're not closing any streets. Yeah.
I hope the church does a sign parking for that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll put out our sign, we'll see what happens. So I would like to make a motion, unless there's further discussion, to approve the parking fines as delineated, and to be updated in Passport.
So motion made by Cindy, second by George, all in favor?
Aye. And I'm happy to take any other questions about the streets meeting.
If none, motion to accept streets committee report.
I'll leave that motion.
And second by Sydney, all in favor?
Aye.
Buildings committee did not meet, is there anything to report?
I do have an update from Mitch about the elevator.
Oh, it has something wrong again?
Oh, yes.
Well, I'd like to know about this.
The elevator has been out of service for almost a month.
Since August 1st.
Yeah, at this point. We are waiting on a belt. And Mitch did talk to Mike Ford from TK Elevator this morning and, you know, elevated the situation to critical.
Pun intended.
Pun intended, yes, the elevated pun was intended.
I have a question, is there like a warranty on the elevator?
It's not that my understanding is we are not paying for these repairs because it hasn't worked, but that doesn't speed up the speed with which we have had difficulty getting parts. It's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. All right, so if nothing else on report about the buildings, moving on, Joe, to treasurer's report.
Thanks, everybody. You have your LoSAP report related to surface for the firefighters are the first two documents. We completed the bank reconciliations of our finance committee meeting. The sales tax report is in your file, and as you can see, June over June, there is a substantial, or relatively substantial increase, 11.44%. So apparently that isn't apparent, it is what it is. We'll see how long that growth continues. We have the portfolio report. I was just reviewing this with Cindy earlier. We budgeted $425,000 in expected revenues. And as of today, with the Passport app income recorded here, we of $58,230. Our current income is $84,192.90. And we still have some time left in the parking season. Cindy was, based on her experience of reviewing this, may well exceed the 400,000, but not, we may not get to the 425.
To 470.
To the 470.
Our budget was 470, yeah.
Our budget was pretty high, I misread that. So, I don't know if there are any questions about that, but that is the status of the parking revenue. We have an engagement letter with Firefly, which manages our LoSAP program, and they have been doing, I think, very good service for us. And I would move that we approve the mayor's signing of this engagement letter.
Motion by Joe, second by
I will.
Richard, all in favor?
And believe it or not, there is still a place for typewriters in the municipal government, and we have needed one.
I spent like 3 whole full minutes trying to figure out why, and then I got it.
I have an old 1948 Royal Select that you're welcome to use.
Well, our diligent staff,
Only one key is stuck.
our diligent staff has identified an appropriate model for their needs, and it's a price of $699. And I move we approve the purchase of that typewriter, or thereabouts,
$699?
more or less $699.
Did you motion?
Yes.
I second. I'm intrigued by using the typewriters.
It's mostly for birth
Birth
certificates and
certificates
so on.
and, yeah.
I have it
Yeah,
that works if you want.
Yeah.
I just want
It's sitting in my living room.
So may we call the question?
So you made the motion to
Cindy
purchase,
seconded it.
or all in favor?
Aye. We have had identified for us surplus items to be sold on Auctions International, a 2020 Dodge Ram 1500, a 2020 Dodge Ram 24500, a 2015 Ford F550, a 2015 Ford F250, and a Smith stainless steel spreader, the nature of which I do not know. But what is this? What is the spreader? Does anybody know what that is?
I imagine it might have been used, is it used a double day?
Grading?
I assume it's like a.
It's like grader of some sort.
Yeah.
A spreader?
No, a grader would be a grader, spreader.
No, like a,
Some product is being placed on something.
All right, so motion made to surplus the items listed on Auctions International, second by
I had a
George.
question. I had a question.
All right.
A salt spreader.
Oh,
It's a salt spreader.
salt spreader.
Just so everyone knows.
I like it better.
So
Yours is better.
Cindy had mentioned mentioned the fact that the fire police might be in need of a vehicle. I am assuming that none of these is appropriate because these are not passenger vehicles, and when they,
I don't know, because when
they're
we.
definitely not police vehicles.
So we had mentioned the police vehicle, and then I think we also mentioned that this often happens where we have village vehicles that go up for auction, and it seemed like they were very interested in that. But I don't know cars, I don't know
But these are all,
past the
These are all
interest.
trucks.
Yeah, or trucks or.
Right, well, I
Truck work.
don't quite understand what the exact need is, whether it's to transport a number of firefighters or whether it's to
no.
block a road.
It's to block a road, is what they had originally said.
but they keep all their safety equipment in it, so unless these have cabs,
Right.
you know, because they have.
Yeah, this would be really a question for
So should-
the chief.
Should we just set up a protocol where before a recommendation to surplus a vehicle is made to the board, that we coordinate through the,
I think this is very easy. We've made a motion, it's been seconded, we'll go ahead and do this, but Mitch, as our DPW superintendent, can reach out to the fire department and see if any of those vehicles would be adequate.
that was my point.
He did say that the Dodge 1500 might pique their interest because it has a bed cover and is 4
That's what
doors.
I'm thinking, that it has a cover,
Okay.
but they have to get up in it. You know, the cover is a lot easier one to put your equipment in. But, so the motion was made, seconded, we're gonna allow the fire department to look at that particular Ford vehicle. All those in favor?
Aye. Item 8 is something that needed to be forwarded to the county for payment. It's the access technology information invoice in the amount of $184. That's not for our consideration tonight, I'm told. We have some invoices. A Doubleday Field Delaware Engineering invoice number 222516-6 in the amount of $1,608. I move the approval of this.
Second.
Second by Richard, all in favor?
We have the Hoffman Lane Pioneer Alley Delta Engineering's invoice number 7 in the amount of $1,960, and I move its payment.
Second.
By Richard, second by Richard, all in favor?
And the Grove Street Culvert Project apparently is about to be officially concluded with the motion to, based on Mitch's recommendation, that we release the $4,000 retainage. The grass has grown on Grove Street, and so I move the approval of that release of the $4,000 retainage.
Second.
Second by Richard, all in favor?
Jenna circulated the overtime analysis and other related documents, and leave analysis. We have item number 3 is a conference and training request for Rich of NICOM's Public Works School. There's a fee of $1,395.29 and related expenses to transport and otherwise, and I move the approval of that request.
Second.
Second by Richard, all in favor?
The change transaction inquiries in the treasurer's office for anyone's review. We are now preparing to appoint a zoning enforcement officer. Jackson won't be returning, or is he?
Jackson has other positions available to him on his return,
I see.
so,
So we have in our,
so you have the new employee who's basically been our interim CEO, Chris DeVille.
is there any discussion of the employer, or can we entertain a motion?
Just go ahead and.
I'll move the approval of the retention of Chris DeVille for zoning enforcement officer's position.
Motion made by Richard.
Joe, but I'll second
Oh,
it.
second by Richard, all in favor?
I move the approval of the abstracts and transfers. that are-
Can we, not to, let's just jump over to our additional agenda items because they involve personnel. It makes it a lot easier for Jenna if we cover
Okay,
all those things at one fell swoop.
so we have several employees. Matt Smith in the Department of Parks to be a park supervisor at the rate of $21.87 per hour. I move his appointment and approval of his rehiring.
Second by Sydney, all in favor?
Dennis Dibble is a candidate for heavy machine equipment operator in the streets department at $21.57 an hour, and I move we approve his hiring.
Second by Cindy, all in favor?
Greg Tyson is a candidate in the streets department for a laborer's position at the rate of $17.94 an hour, and I move we approve of his appointment.
Second by Cindy, all in favor?
Aye. And now I move the approval of the abstracts and transfers in your packet.
All in favor?
Aye. And the other documents, the abstract accounts payable report and the change transaction inquiry for the vendors is available in the treasurer's office for your review. And I think that concludes.
Yeah, a motion to accept the treasurer's report by Sydney.
No, go ahead, you.
Sydney.
Sure, okay.
It looks more realistic.
Absolutely.
And second by Joe, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Moving on, grants and projects update. Doubleday Field, I know Mitch was meeting with them today. There have been a few things on the, the list that need to be sort of wrapped up on it. So at this point, there wasn't approval for any of the invoices at that point. But it's quite exciting, and the ribbon cutting was exciting, and the building itself has just been used a lot. We are going to put up signage that no spikes can go in the new pavilion, because we're finding not the rubber mat. The rubber mat has been ideal in the corridor, but unfortunately, there's no rubber matting in our bathrooms, and they are tearing up the floors. And interestingly, we must not have a lot of female softball teams playing there, because that floor still looks gorgeous. But, yeah, so there are some little issues to address yet. Cindy, do you want to give an update at all on Hoffman Lane, Pioneer Alley?
Yeah, so we've received engineering reports from Delta Engineering, we can pay the bill for that, for Hoffman Lane and Pioneer Alley. I emailed those to you. They are both about 30 pages long without the appendices. With the appendices, they are about 250 pages long each. Much of the appendices are calculations as to volume of stormwater. So if you want them, let me know, and I'll find a way to share them with you. Those reports were done largely as a mechanism to seek funding for those two projects. And in the case of Pioneer Alley, there are individuals from the Army Corps of Engineers who are coming on the 12th, and we will share our plans with them as well. That's not their prime reason for being here, but it would be good to get their input on that project as well.
Moving on, New York Forward. Some of you did attend our last LPC meeting, which was last Wednesday. And we put it out there, but I'll keep reminding everyone that the consultants are in charge of the New York Forward page on our website. And they have done a great job. You can go back to LPC 1, you can see the PowerPoint, you can see all the materials. And the same is true for all of the LPC meetings on there. Just in case you didn't attend, I think we had mentioned this before, for that open call for projects, the village did put in 6 applications. We put in for Fowler Way, Doubleday Field, irrigation and netting expenses, Grove Street wayfinding, and Hoffman Lane, Pioneer Alley, and Upper Main wayfinding. That last one is one we're doing kind of cooperatively with the county to basically encourage better signage up on Main Street. So, you know, if you're walking from there up to the red lot, it's just not kind of unknown. There'll be a nice sign about the courthouse, etc. So that's all very exciting. If you were there, you know that the whole concept in New York Forward is to have transformative projects, and they really love to leverage private funds. So for our $4.5 million award, the state would like us to submit about 6 to 8 million in projects. We don't pick them. We kind of rank them a little bit, but not really. They go on up, and the state picks the projects. And for our $4.5 million award, there were over 12.8 million in requests. So there will be a little bit of fine tuning on that. Relative to that, one of the projects we put in was Fowler Way, and I just want to mention that in that December 2017 double-day engineering plan that we utilized to get funding and do a lot of the projects that we have done in Doubleday, Fowler Way was in there. As we think about it right now, prior to the Fowler Pavilion bleachers, which have a ramp and ADA compliant access, our only ADA access wheelchair seating was on our first base bleachers. And the way that someone in a wheelchair would have to access that ramp and that first base seating would be to wheel down Fowler Way into oncoming vehicular traffic. Obviously not well designed. So we always had it a goal to try and improve Fowler Way, both as an entrance off State Route 28, Chestnut, to get vehicles coming in there before they head down and start circulating on our Main Street looking for parking, get them into our Doubleday lot, but also dress up that whole entrance. And so there are some engineering concerns on that road. And in addition, you had a proposal from David Cruz at Pissarro Engineering and Architecture for doing basically a design project on Fowler Way for a total of $12,000. So very reasonable, and we'll come up with some good design images and address some of the challenges we have on Fowler Way. So are there any questions on any of that?
How did he come to us?
He actually is someone that we utilize. The name is probably familiar to you because this is the same firm that we approached for our April Road study.
For the traffic study.
Correct. Are there any other questions? No? If not, then I will make a motion that we utilize Doubleday reserve funds subject to permissive referendum to pay this fee estimate of $12,000. Second by Anna, do you want to second
Sure.
it? Second it. Do you have any questions or no?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right. All those in favor? The next Welcome Home Cooperstown is September 5th, which is, again, the first Tuesday in September, 5:30 to 7. These have been, and we're hoping the weather will still hold. It's nice to have them out on the front porch and people kind of just stop by, and hope to see some trustees there. It's always great, and we've been getting fabulous attendance from new residents and physicians from the hospital.
You said September 5th?
September 5th, Tuesday, September 5th, 5:30.
I have a question just about, I mean, obviously, all are welcome, but should we encourage people who are starting positions in Cooperstown, but not necessarily living in Cooperstown to join?
We've had, right from the very first one, it was interesting, I met some people who moved up during the pandemic, they don't live in the village, they both work, remotely, they both have sort of positions, they could do that, and they were thrilled to come into the village, so I think it's designed for anyone to kind of,
Excellent.
Sure.
I know some new teachers starting at Cooperstown who don't live in the village, but are interested
absolutely.
in meeting some
Yeah.
folks. So-
Our goal is to get them to ultimately
Yeah.
live here forever.
As soon as we build
Yeah,
them,
excellent.
as soon as we build them affordable housing.
All right, so that's it for grants and projects update. Moving on, we have Parks Board.
Okay, I have a lot of things to cover, so everyone get comfortable. So I'll just move down, there's sort of a list here in the agenda of things that I'll cover. I have a few additions, but also, of course, if you have any questions about anything in the minutes, or comments, you can feel free to let me know. So I'll start with the 3 Mile Fishing Pier. There should be an email from the Friends of the Parks, sort of behind the minutes, from Susie Knight. And this is in regards to the 3 Mile Point Fishing Pier that seems to need decking replacement and new railings. The Friends of the Parks met with Mitch, and he said that unfortunately his crew is not going to be able to take on the repairs, so they were asking for us to approve them proceeding with this project. And then they said to send it out for bid, which I think is a little bit confusing. I think what they're asking for right now is approval that we're interested in them moving forward with whatever. So I know that Tom Hohensee needs to apply for some permitting, and then just sort of see where that, how that will move forward. I definitely think it's worth, repairing. I don't know if Susie said it in this email. I know, oh yes, so they were hoping to begin work this fall. I do think that it seems more likely if there were to be repairs that we're gonna move forward with, that they would be in early spring. It just makes a bit more sense. And
So this is all work that the Friends of the Parks would like to undertake there. That's all they're asking is for.
yes and no. They were interested in seeing if the village would be able to fund lumber for the project. I think that because I haven't been given an estimate of what physically has to be done, we can't really agree to fund anything on that end, but I do know that they are interested in having us sort of say, yes, you can go ahead with permitting, yes, you can sort of reach out to contractors. At least that's my understanding after rereading this email a couple of times. I think their initial thought was that the project would be in the couple thousands of dollars, which they had funding for. And then upon talking to Mitch and sort of having a couple more conversations, it seems like a much bigger project, but I still don't know.
I think it'd be good to get a plan on what they're doing, because it is very possible that the railing is no longer compliant.
Right.
It's an older one. I did discuss it with Mitch only because in, must have been 2019 or 20, it was originally installed by the Rotary Club. It has a plaque on it to that effect. So, but it was in need of repair at that time, and the Cooperstown Rotary Club, we applied for a district grant, and which we got, that was like, I don't know, $2,000, $2,500. Then the club and the Rotary Foundation threw in money, and the village put in a little bit, and they did well over $7,000. It was like $7,500 worth of repairs So 3 years ago. So my only concern is if we're gonna continue to replace wood on a structure that's on the shore of the lake that keeps, deteriorating and needing more, maybe should we be looking at Trex, or
Yeah.
that thing. So I think a good plan for what would be undertaken on this would be good, and,
Yeah.
there might be additional assistance from other
Absolutely.
organizations as
Yep,
well.
yep, so as long as we are comfortable with sort of letting the Friends of the Parks move forward with what they have to undertake to get a better understanding of what.
I think
goes into it.
ideally what would be
Yeah.
great would be to have an estimate.
Yeah,
sort of,
exactly, yeah.
So, and, typically with the village, we get 3 estimates. So if, instead of selecting sort of one contractor, they could get a couple and, think about materials that might not need replacing every 4 years or whatever.
Yeah,
That would be
absolutely.
beneficial.
I know Tom had also reached out to me, he's eager to sort of start any permitting processes that might need to go in hand.
When it was done in, a few years ago, I mean, it's not in the water. There really weren't any
He
permitting
seems to think that it
processes.
needs to go through Town of Otsego Planning Board.
Oh, we did go
Yeah.
there.
So he just wanted our approval for doing that
Oh, okay.
as well, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so more to come on that in the coming months. All right.
May I just ask one last
Yeah.
question on that? In terms of ADA compliance,
Mhm.
will somebody be bird dogging those criteria so that we're still, whatever we spend money on is going to be found to be compliant?
I would assume that whoever is employed to do the work would be making sure that they're working within.
Well,
I mean, we can make that a stipulation of sort of the process. And that can be something that we're constantly checking in on, but that's a good question.
Assumptions on who's gonna do the work means nobody does the work.
So, all right, well, we'll see where that takes us. Okay, next thing is the sample indemnification agreement, which I sent, I don't remember when I sent that email, but it is in the packet here. This is a template of what Mike Hutcherson had sent. So, obviously this would need to be sort of reworded if we were interested in using something like this. But essentially the idea would be having some sort of agreement with the Friends of the Parks so that they might be able to use, I wouldn't call it heavy, they would be able to use machinery of some sort, right? So like snow blowers, nothing that's heavy, nothing that they need certification on, at Badger Park Rink. They're very interested in being able to sort of go out there and clean it up when needed. I do think this will also alleviate some burden on the seasonal laborers. There's been a lot of back and forth. So I am very interested in, if this is possible legally, being able to set something up like this, and I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts. And I know that you sent that volunteer.
Well, only
Yeah.
because the only question I had was workers' compensation. And so I did want to follow up with Mike Hutchinson about that. And he said, obviously in our insurance, we cover volunteers. And he said, when they're using these guidelines, and he sent the NYMER, I think you got this separately. Yeah. These are and you can see that sort of machinery is a little taboo.
So,
But
yes.
I guess that's maybe where that comes in, but for workers' compensation, he said that NYMER would deny a claim. They can always appeal that, but there is some volunteer insurance for that.
Okay, and I also have talked to the Friends of the Parks about their own insurance, and they are looking into that. So they're not sure where they stand when it comes to insurance. That's something that they're working on. And obviously I don't think that we would want to enter into any type of agreement unless they were clearer on where they stand with that. I know in the last meeting that I was present at, their Friends of the Parks meeting, that was one of their action items. So this might be something that we have a clearer vision on the next board meeting. But yeah, I wanted to get a general sense of.
So what you alluded to is sort of my question. Is this an indemnification agreement that the Friends of the Parks has with the village of Cooperstown, and then they deal with their volunteers however
They want.
they want? Or is it intended to be an indemnification agreement that individuals have with the village of Cooperstown? The latter seems to me a more protected approach for the village.
Yes, I agree, and when I did speak about it with the Friends of the Parks, it was their inclination to designate specific people to enter into this agreement. So it would be with individuals that are that are members of the Friends of the Parks, but no one who hasn't entered into this agreement can do those activities. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be better if they, as an organization, indemnify the village.
Okay.
And then internally, they can deal with who they want to designate. It just seems to me, particularly where their insurance is involved.
Do they don't
Yeah.
have any insurance,
That's my
right?
question too.
No, but they are no, with an asterisk, in that they aren't 100% sure. They're a nonprofit. They have talked about, and maybe I was just unclear on whether they have insurance, but they're not sure what they're actually paying for, but things will be made clearer the next Friends of the Parks meeting.
Yeah.
I think that if they did not have insurance, they would be interested in getting that so that they could do these things, because this is not sort of the only instance where they would wanna volunteer their time and efforts. There's a lot of different areas where they sort of see themselves as stepping in. So. Does that
Yeah,
answer your question?
it is a tricky thing, because this could wind up being extremely expensive for Friends of the Park
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
insure themselves.
Yeah,
And
That's their decision.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's a great, and I believe that I will be at their next meeting, and I can sort of update them on, perhaps this is something that they enter into.
And by the same token, if we talk about individuals, that earlier part of the discussion, their insurance may be affected. I mean, how do they?
Yeah.
We don't want to put people in the position of becoming pauperized because they use a snowblower incorrectly.
I absolutely agree. I do think that taking the necessary steps for, if it were to become the case where they realize how much money it would be for them to actually take on this endeavor, that might be the end of this conversation. I know it's been something that we keep coming back to. And so when the ball is in the Friends of the Parks court and there's sort of understanding financially the risk that they're taking, it might change the conversation.
So you suggest just letting them go ahead and find out?
Well, do you
Yes.
think is there anything you need from, say, Martin or us to inform the next meeting you're gonna be at? Do you have enough to go on?
Because they're unclear about their own insurance situation, I don't think I have enough yet. I think that I will touch base with the Friends of the Parks, because that meeting was a few weeks ago, and maybe they're at a different point now. And if I get some more information, then perhaps I can touch base with Martin, just, I'll give you a call and we can talk about it, but.
It might be good to share this, just so they're aware of our NYMER, because it does say in here, authorized volunteers' actions are covered under the NYMER Commercial General Liability Policy. There is also a small limit for medical payments coverage under the CGL for injuries to a volunteer. Additionally, most homeowner policies cover the policyholder for non-paid volunteer activities. I have to say, I read that and I thought, I wonder, I'm gonna go read my own
Yeah.
policy tonight. I don't even know if it did.
Mhm.
But I also thought the activities, and I think the snow blower,
Mhm.
because that, it does say what would be advised, they were giving examples, and they say, digging ditches, with backhoes or using chainsaws it can't be
Right,
Yeah.
done. So I do worry about a snow blower.
Right.
So I do think, there has to be recognition of this.
It does kind of fall between, I mean,
I
a
know.
snow blower isn't quite the same
It's
as
not a
a
chainsaw.
chainsaw or a backhoe, but
So-
I know people who have,
I've taken care of many snow blower accidents.
So-
I was gonna say, yeah.
I will say that it says here that volunteers should not be on ladders, scaffolding, or mechanical lifts, or use power tools unless they have the required experience or certification. And I do think that those individuals who have suggested interest in participating in this way would be considered to have the required
I just think it's
experience.
good, so everybody gets it up
Yeah,
front.
yeah.
Nevertheless, I will repeat what I just said. I gotta take care of hands that have been mangled in snow blowers. That's the end of discussion for me.
Okay,
Is there a snow blower certification course?
I can definitely look into that.
I'm sure there is.
So what I'll do is I'm gonna go back to the Friends of the Parks, talk to them about their own insurance and see where they stand on that. And this will sort of be asterisks until we have a little bit more to go on. But with all of the questions and all of the caveats and everything, I do really feel if there is a way for us to figure out, an agreement where they can do some of these activities that they have been pushing for, it would really be beneficial to the village, the Friends of the Parks, because they know how they want their the ice rink, and also the village itself. So, so more to come on that as well. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
You have more to your report?
Of the Parks Board?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, that's okay, that's
Yes.
fine, I'll get you later.
yes, I have a lot. We are not even close to a third of the way in. Okay. All right, so moving forward, the lakefront buffer strip maintenance. I don't know if you all have been to the buffer strip recently, but it is extremely overgrown, which is unfortunate. So the Parks Board recommends that the village board sort of approve using the funds that are set aside for buffer strip maintenance to employ a contracted landscaping firm. I have gotten a quote from Boss Landscaping, and I apologize that's not in here. I also planned on getting a quote from Mount Vision and from Epic Landscaping, but classes started at work this week, so it's been a little bit hectic. However, I do wonder if we can approve using those funds contingent on receiving those 3 quotes and sort of going with the one that makes the most financial sense. We have $5,000 set aside for the maintenance of the buffer strip. From what Boss Landscaping had discussed, they would, for about $1,050, do a general total cleanup of the area, and for about $360. After that, they would, they suggested bi-weekly, though we feel that it might make more sense for just monthly sort of efforts in there, where they would go weed, trim, prune, etc. And if you do the math on that from May to October, it falls just underneath that $5,000. In fact, I think it's somewhere around like $3,650.
If they're suggesting bi-weekly, would they charge more per month if you only did
That's a good
monthly?
question. So their line item is just per visit, and then they suggest bi-weekly.
I know
Like,
some
yeah,
companies up it if you
go.
let it get more grown.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can definitely ask them. And I don't know if this is something where we want to approve using the funds, and then I can work with Mitch on reaching out to multiple, I know we're gonna have to get at least, I don't know if this is a procurement or if this is
You need
service.
3 estimates.
3 estimates,
Yeah.
cause so we need at least 3 estimates,
Do you know if any of those funds have been
used this year,
utilized?
no.
You checked, okay.
My question, I assume it's the east side where it's kind of overgrown along the pathway, the boardwalk, that's people deem problematic, but I thought I had heard a counter narrative that was intentional to have that be overgrown and as pollinator habitat and an example of that. And the only thing I would recommend is, even if our own crew could just cut it,
Yeah,
cut it back so you have full access to the boardwalk.
yeah, so.
It seems,
Mhm.
so I don't know what actually
Needs
the
to be-
garden club
yeah.
or whoever would recommend.
So I can tell you what I recommend as someone who gardens. I think the garden club has not, they have sort of stepped out of the picture. In addition to it being overgrown, which is obviously a problem, right? You want to be able to walk through the space. If you sort of dig in there, there is like mile-a-minute weed on everything, which is not good. So it is strangling a lot of the early plants. It's going everywhere. It needs to be pulled up. It's just not, it's gonna end up making the entire space look really, really terrible in the next grow year. And I think if we can sort of contract someone to get things looking nice for the tail end of the summer and then put to bed for the fall and then sort of wake up all the plants in the spring, we'll be in a better situation, both in terms of like how it looks and then also what's actually growing, because those types of weeds, that's gonna lead to us having to rethink the whole space, so, yeah.
I think easily get 3 quotes, talk to Mitch. We have funds in the budget. I know we allotted 5,000. There is a certain amount that's come out of that line, but I don't know if any of it, went for mulch, because I remember they were mulching there. So just find out exactly what's left in that.
When I spoke to Deb, it seemed
Okay.
like there was, that was not.
Have not been
touched.
touched at all.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, then, I
so-
think that's a good idea,
Great.
because when our next budget comes into effect, it'll be June 1st. And, so we
Yeah.
might as well.
So my question is, do we have to wait until the next board meeting to approve those 3 quotes? Or can we approve the funds, using the funds, and then I will get 3 quotes with Mitch, and then we'll just sort of choose one? Because I would love to get this, and it is my fault that I didn't get the 2 other quotes ahead of this meeting, but it would be great to get things started as soon as possible and not at the end of September.
I feel like we could approve spending up to $5,000
Yeah. Okay.
in keeping with our procurement
Okay.
policy.
And estimates,
Is
yeah.
that a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second
Seconded by Richard, all in favor?
Aye.
Can I ask, before we leave that topic, it's Cindy, in the Hoffman Lane project, there was talk of rain garden, buffer strip sort of thing. Is that something else than what we've got?
Yes, it is not intended to be like what the buffer strip is. It's much more designated areas with certain types of water-friendly plants to help deal with drainage. But think more the size of the rain gardens on Main Street than the buffer strip along the lake.
And where would they wouldn't be on Hoffman Lane?
No, they're at the top of Lakefront Park. I mean, I do think like long-term, because it seems like every year for the past few years,
Yeah.
we've had this discussion that and I don't know what it is, but there has to be some sort of plan moving forward with how not to end up in the situation
Yeah.
every August that you could barely walk down the boardwalk.
No, I totally agree, and I do think that if we are sort of employing, and I don't know if this is something that we want to keep doing every year, but if we do want to keep setting aside that amount in the budget to employ a landscaping company to come in and not just, not when it gets bad, but like consistently sort of upkeep the area so that it's staying nice and functional. I mean, I think that is the way to mitigate that, but that's also just sort of a question of finances and budgets, so.
Is there any reason our crew cannot just cut a vertical line?
They-
They do hedge trimming, they're doing a
They
great job.
certainly, I mean, I am sure that, that can be proposed to Mitch, just to have them literally just go in and cut a little bit, but I really do think that
The
there's.
rest needs to be
Yeah.
done, I'm not questioning that.
And I will also say, just having gone and walked through there and spent like a meticulous amount of time looking at the different plants and where they were planted, there were a number of plants that were planted way too close to the boardwalk itself. Like, you know, just thinking about how they grow, not just up, but out, it, you know, maybe that would be a conversation with Boss Landscaping about just taking some of those out and maybe moving them, or, you know.
This is all,
yeah.
could be worked out with
Yeah.
landscaping. Richard?
Fine, who's legally responsible for the buffer strip?
See, this is always interesting because this.
Because here's my, let me tell you where this is going.
Mhm.
I'm gonna walk down there, and I'm gonna call Mitch, and I'm gonna complain as a citizen about the plants overlapping this boardwalk. That puts him on notice that he either has to notify the owner of it, who's responsible for it, to get it.
Which is us.
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 Well, it's us.
Okay, so it is us, that's what I am.
Yeah.
Then we have to take it down, because there's no question. We have to send our crew out to take down what is overlapping the pathway right now. Forget any of this.
What the problem becomes, what is it that we don't want the crew to do
Mhm.
that would give them time to do the buffer strip? Because we start paving in 2 weeks, and there are crosswalks that still need to be painted.
Right.
Because
before
crosswalks
school
have
starts.
to be painted before
Right,
school
yeah.
starts, so there is a priority list, and I have to tell you, shrubs on a boardwalk are probably lower on that priority
How much
list.
do you think it would cost to have somebody go through there and do that?
Well, I know how much it'll cost. It'll cost $3,650.
Just to do
No,
one-
for
to-
6 months. No, it's $1,050 for,
Just to do one hedge trimming?
no, just to
All
clean up the whole
right,
area.
this is a lot of
Yeah.
committee work, so we're gonna move on.
We can talk more about it. if you
Yeah,
want.
we can
'Cause
talk
I have-
more.
I have like.
You'll
3
work
more.
with Mitch on the 3 quotes, great.
Yep.
We got the phone.
Perfect, excellent. Okay, next thing, Council Rock sign has arrived. It's been printed, it's in. Will Walker is going to be talking with Mitch about putting in the sign at Council Rock. And Will and I were thinking about having a formal unveiling for this. Will suggested the weekend of October 14th or 15th. He's coming up with more of an idea of what that might look like. But I was wondering if that seems like a good date for the board, especially because I do imagine that he would probably like to have the mayor say some words about it. I will also say that October is Indigenous Peoples' History Month, so I think that's a great time to do this.
If it's any date, the 15th would, I think, work nice on
Okay.
a Sunday.
Yeah.
As opposed to sometimes a Saturday.
Doing it on Indigenous Peoples' Day.
What?
Doing it on Indigenous Peoples' Day.
The 9th, no, that was, I don't remember why that was not, I think Will is not available that weekend.
It's Sumi Oneonta's fall break, so I believe
Yeah.
he may be traveling.
So,
Break already?
In October.
yeah, in October, so, I will get an outline of what Will is envisioning for this type of event. I also know that there's a lot of restrictions about what can and cannot happen in Council Rock, so once I get an idea of what he's thinking, we'll sort of figure out how to maneuver around those respectfully, so. But as long as everyone can keep that date in mind, it would be great to get a full board presence. I think this is a really, really excellent step into the future of Cooperstown, and it's been a long time coming, so.
I'm not available that day.
Okay. All right, so, the next thing is just sort of the Friends of the Parks have indicated that they would like to purchase a pickleball set for Badger Park. I just figured it would be of interest to tell you all, yes,
I had read
the noise, the
in
noises,
the New
yes,
York
yes,
Times that
yes.
noise is just gonna drive the neighbors
Yes.
nuts.
So the question that we
It's
had
just-
was how that noise might be different from an intense basketball game that's happening, which
Because if you wanna hear
A
it,
series of
Go-
sharp reports.
yeah,
That's
go
what-
over to the Clark Sports Center
Mhm.
because they set up pickleball on the tennis courts.
Yeah.
So it would be
Mhm.
similar, I bet you it's quieter on those tennis courts than it is on blacktop. The ball, between the paddle, the wooden paddle and the thing, all I know is I've heard it and it is remarkably loud.
Mhm.
And I know we talked about, the idea of a dog park within the village, maybe being at Badger Park, and we worried about dogs barking. Well, this would be like 50 dogs barking over the course of an hour. So, but anyway,
So,
just
yeah.
check out the Clark Sports Center. Look up and see
Oh,
when
yeah, no,
they're-
I'm there all the time, I play tennis next to people playing pickleball.
Oh,
Yeah, so, I mean, but maybe I'm just desensitized, so
Oh.
it might just be my ears are
That-
not picking
Well,
it
no,
up.
it's when you're in the game, it's
Yeah,
great, but
yeah.
if you're just minding your own business, it's
So,
not good.
so,
I think it's an idea to look into, and,
Pickleball.
most of the time, you're really bounded by the back of the
Mhm.
Price Chopper, and a lot of, and then it's residential on the
Right.
other three sides of Badger
yeah,
Park.
so for all I know, the Friends of the Parks have already purchased this, because this was an
Thank
idea that they had, and then when they brought it to the Parks Board meeting, we were like, maybe we should make sure that this is something that we wanna approve and accept. So my question is, are we comfortable with saying they should do that it's gonna be a, not permanent structure, and then should there be active complaints, then ask
Where
them
is the net and all going to be kept?
in Badger Park.
But just
Just-
rolled up
yeah.
and
It's
set
not
to
even
the,
rolled out, it's like on wheels, you just move it to the side. The same, like similarly to how it is at Clark Sports Center. Yeah, and then it would be, there would be no paddles there, it would be similar to how basketball is, bring your own.
bring your
So,
own paddle.
If you do it, can we suggest that there's a 30-day experimental period to see what type of response we get?
If the rest of the board is comfortable with that and wants to, I'm sure.
Do we limit other sporting events in the park?
No,
If someone were to bring their own net?
yeah, I mean, what's to keep
What are
anyone
they
from
bringing?
setting up?
Their own net?
Yeah, if someone, truly, what's to keep anyone from bringing their own portable pickleball net?
Sometimes you have to run things up the flagpole. I mean, we change a law and then we realize we really should have had boat parking or trailer parking in another area.
Mhm.
We'll go with it and see if we get
Complaints.
some,
Okay.
complaints. Some
Yeah.
people might not be bothered
Yeah.
about it. I think it's a very noisy thing.
I will say that in the conversations they had, they did bring up that New York Times article. And it was talked about, so I think they're aware, and I can sort of nudge back saying, we're all a little concerned, so if there do end up being a lot of complaints about this is maybe something that gets shifted away, yes.
I'm going to make a motion that we approve it with a 30-day sunset clause, and at the end of 30 days, it comes back to the board for community input and evaluation as to whether it's going to continue. So it's very clear to them that it may not continue.
Okay.
That's motion. Anybody can second?
Seconded by,
Nobody? All right.
Well, my problem is if we don't limit any other activity.
why would we limit?
If
Right.
we allow skateboarding, for instance, which
Yeah.
is also
Is it not
a
noisy?
skateboarding's a pretty
Yes,
noisy
very noisy.
activity.
When they put the ramps up there,
Yeah,
they bring their ramps
Or
and
if you
jump.
have someone who's doing 10,000 kickflips in a row,
Yeah.
it's very
All right, well,
noisy.
that's certainly,
10,000
there's certainly-
Kickflips, my brother was a skateboarder, so when you flip the skateboard.
All right, so that motion, we're going ahead and just let
Okay,
them know
yep.
that they're, it's kind of a trial period.
sensitive.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna be sensitive.
Yeah.
We're not voting on anything. I would vote to oppose pickleball on Badger Park, if anybody's interested.
That
too.
wasn't what the motion was.
No, I know, so, and that's.
And I would too, but that's not my
Second.
motion.
So I don't know, what are we
Do you,
saying?
well, there was not a second to Richard's. Do you
Right,
want to
it died,
second
It
it?
dies.
No, so it died.
Okay, it
It's not my
died.
motion.
So do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, make a motion, I'll second
My
it.
motion would be not to approve of pickleball in Badger Park.
I'll second that.
Second by Richard. Any more discussion?
No, the point, yes, now that we have a motion on the floor, as we say, we're not in the business of regulating things, but this is just coming up by somebody's say-so when there doesn't seem to have been any due diligence by the proponents, even though they recognize that there may be a noise issue. Have they canvassed the neighborhood or done something to? I don't want to be in the position of having sanctioned.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, which is to forbid pickleball in Badger Park, please say aye.
Aye.
So 2, nay. All right, so the motion fails. So please go back to them and tell them that,
Yeah.
you
And a
know,
rip.
that
And we'll
there
be-
was serious discussion
Yes.
about the noise, so they should be
Yep.
aware of that concern. And if there are complaints, it
Mhm.
certainly would have to be something
Okay.
to be addressed.
We have a noise ordinance, right? And
Right.
so if it's
Yeah.
violating the noise ordinance and someone brings that to our attention.
That's
we
great.
can-
It's so
But there
hard
isn't
to
enough
enforce it.
light to be doing it late, you know, beyond a certain time.
But even during the day in residential areas,
But it's
I
so hard to
believe that-
enforce that, Cindy.
Yeah, it's, the noise ordinance won't work.
Okay,
Okay, I have one more item, and then I'm done, I swear. Okay, so the Parks Board has discussed and also recommends that the Village Board seriously consider moving forward with purchasing a roll-in dock for 3 Mile Park.
Rolling one.
A roll-in dock. I understand this is something that was discussed before, I think not when I was on the board. And essentially, what I would like to do is move forward with seeing what options are, the prices, and trying to find out ways to get that in motion. I talked to Chris Satriano, and something that we've noticed, and you've probably all sort of seen, we've had a number of parks supervisors in the past 2 years. We've had 3. It is a job that those who are in it get burnt out fairly quickly. The building of the dock at 3 Mile takes sometimes up to 3 weeks, depending on the weather. And then the park supervisor is already 3 weeks late on everything else that they have to take care of, right? They're one person taking care of 7 parks. Should there be something implemented like a roll-in dock that would significantly decrease the amount of work that needs to be done for 3 Mile Park to be usable and for the people to be able to swim, it would mean more attention to other parks that really need it, especially Ferry Spring takes another few weeks, weather dependent, to build a dock. Not to mention the rest of the parks that then might not get any attention during those times. And there's been a lot of research done by Chris and Mitch on, on docks that would be suitable for this space. So I do think that it is kind of the future of the parks if we want to keep seeing them in tip-top shape. There's been lots of complaints in different areas, and I also understand that, if we want to keep a park supervisor, it's my opinion that a park supervisor should be working for 3 years. Like at 3 years, you're finally realizing, troubleshooting all of the issues, how to schedule what you're supposed to do with which park at what time. That's not something that you can figure out in 1 year, and we've had so many in 3 years. So we just have not had consistent care. And this is one of those things that would kind of keep us from maybe losing some really valuable workers.
I'm intrigued by your 3-year comment. I think I was gonna be against it now. I think your arguments are good, and you can ameliorate the aluminum problems to some extent by having rubber mats.
Yeah, so, and I will say that the company that we I shouldn't say we, because I really didn't put any work into this, that Chris and Mitch sort of put into it, or pinpointed. They have a dock that is aluminum based, and it has sort of a top cover that looks like wood, and it's not metal, it doesn't conduct heat the same, it mitigates some of those issues that have been brought up in the past.
We have 50,000 in the budget. I would say have them go forward on it. My reservation always in the past was, we have an aluminum dock at our camp, and I've gone by 3 Mile and seen 8 or 10 people out on the wooden dock, and it's pretty stable. I'm not sure I'd get 8 or 10 people on my dock without it. You're feeling like you're moving because of it's not, when you roll them out, they're not on posts in the water. They're not as stable. I might think of something like our floating docks at Lakefront. But again, then you'd need to bubble, and I've been told that the ice, I don't know why the ice would be more damaging on the south side of 3 Mile, but I have been told that than at the southern end of the lake. But let's go ahead, the money's in there. Look at the docks, see what they are before we buy. That would be my only suggestion. If there's one that we think we want, take a field trip and walk on that dock and see how effective you find it is in a municipal setting where it's getting lots of use. So the funds are there.
And my only comment on that too is that we did discuss this some time ago, and it quickly was realized that the aluminum docks were really not engineered and suitable for the heavy traffic.
That would be the only thing, just ascertain that before we spend $50,000 and find that it's not adequate for a municipal park.
And as an addendum to our dock issue, boy, our day slips are getting the daylights beat out of them. The rubber stripping is off. There's some of the metal work is being damaged. They get used pretty roughly. And understandably, perhaps, but it's.
Oh, yeah, they're getting.
All right, so anything else on Parks Board? Are we ready to accept the Parks Board report?
Do you have
Question about the dog park.
Yes. Oh, that was something that I should bring up too. Yeah.
You can bring it up, or I can do my question.
No,
first.
question first, and I'll let you know.
And this is going to refer back to the New York Times. There's an article in the Times, and I wish I hadn't read it in the middle of the night, because I would have the forethought to send it to you, that dog parks may not be a very good idea, especially for dogs. I'll try and find the article.
I read it too. It argued that they were very good for humans and not so good for dogs.
Yep.
I have read similar arguments before. I also know that dog owners are, generally speaking, they understand the limitations of their own dogs. And for example, I have a reactive dog, one of them. I will never bring her to a dog park. It's not a good idea. I have another dog who's timid, so I would bring her to a dog park, but sort of apprehensively. So I do think that it is, and after speaking to the insurance, it is up to the owner on, as they enter into the dog park, the liability of anything is on them.
I think that this article that Richard's talking about is much more nuanced about the health of the dog.
Yes, oh no, I know, the
It has nothing to do
psychology
with
of
dog
dogs,
bites and
yes.
stuff. But it was really interesting to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, did everybody read this article?
I don't know if you know this, but I'm a dog person and I keep up with dog news. But I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this.
We have an executive session tonight.
Yes, no, I know.
Finish
I know.
up Parks Board.
I don't know if I mentioned this in the last village board meeting because I wasn't here. But after speaking with Mike Hutcherson, we would not incur any additional costs for insurance.
It's not in the village, so we don't even care.
So
you really should be talking to town about Seago if you want to locate it in that area, because it's not a village property. Yeah.
All right, that's all.
Motion to accept the Parks Board report?
So moved.
Second by George, all in favor?
Aye.
Community and Environment Committee.
We've covered most of this already. I'll just remind you under New York Forward that there is a public open house workshop on September 13th from noon to 4. So mark your calendars and go to the fire hall to be able to comment on projects and encourage your friends to do the same thing. We talked about.
Can I ask you one question? I used to know who to contact for the fire department sign. Who do I contact now? You know?
There's a sign request on the website. Only one side of the sign is currently working.
I know that.
But if you go to cooperstownfd.org, there's like a sign request thing.
Thank you.
We talked about EV fast chargers. Last time we were together, we talked about the federal DOT first come, first served grant. I'm happy to report that Ellen got that grant application in 11 minutes. We had,
My fingers were shaking.
we had the receipt that had been received in 14 minutes, so.
I went back and checked. Did I drop info in the wrong line?
Yeah, so hopefully that was faster than most of the other applicants who were applying for that. We're continuing to talk about climate smart communities and ways we can effectively, without overburdening our staff, participate in that. And something that has come up through numerous channels is that, the village is really doing a lot when it comes to lake and river health. This isn't new. It goes back before HABs. It goes back to stopping using sand and switching to salt more than 20 years ago at this point. And not everybody is aware of that. And there's been a lot of poo-pooing, lack of action and the like, and I think it's important that we sort of toot our own horn and find ways, not just in Village Voices, which goes to residents, but more broadly, let folks throughout Otsego County know what we've been doing to protect Otsego Lake and to ensure the health of the Susquehanna River.
That's a great idea. Any questions, comments on community and environment? No, motion to accept the report by Joe, second by George, all in favor?
Aye.
Moving on, we have water and sewer.
Not a lot to report. You'll see that there were a couple of issues raised about overuse of water and clearing septic lines. In the cases that came up in the last meeting, there was the recommendation of the staff and the consensus of the board was that there's no liability on our part for reimbursement of costs associated with them. The only other thing, and meanwhile, the meter reading and other administration is just moving smoothly. I would just point out that something I raised, whether there was any testing going on for COVID in our sewer water, which a lot of municipalities are doing just to develop data on the spread, and we seem to be having an increase just generally in COVID now. And I don't know how we would go about doing it, but do we want to start a testing protocol or find a way to cooperate with others who are doing testing for COVID and sewage water?
It's my understanding that it's a qualitative effect, not a quantitative effect. And if you're looking to see if we have any COVID in the water, we're going to have COVID in the water.
Well, I think there is, I thought there was some quantitative relationship there, but in any event, not a lot to dwell on. I bring it up because apparently COVID is
And I know they do it in Oneonta because of the student body largely.
And I thought there was a quantitative measure to it because.
All right, it could be, I could be wrong.
I think it's a concentration level, isn't that?
Well, that's the same difference, yeah.
Well, it's not saying 100 people are affected, it's a little different,
Right, that's a period. It could be wrong.
I think it's worth looking into. I don't know what the cost factor is associated with it.
And what are we going to do with the information?
Well, it goes to public health interest, and we're a contributor to knowledge about presence of COVID. It helps the county, it helps.
Nobody's more concerned about COVID than I am. But what are we actually going to do with this information? Are we going to give it to the county? Are they interested in getting it from us? Are they going to use it? Before we,
All of the tests that are done at our water plant, because our water plant is regulated by the Department of Health, go to the Department of Health. So they would get that information.
We can see, I can ask the fellows to look into
Yeah.
the costs.
I think I would be more intrigued, would it be useful information for Bassett Hospital? That, to me, would be a relevant one, because we personally in the village probably would not be able to.
I'll agree with you on that one.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know who would have that conversation that way, you know, see if they would.
I think you would want to talk to Dr. Meebus because he's chairman of the Department of Medicine. So he would be over all the medical departments, and those would be the ones most interested in COVID.
Yeah, so we're not poo-pooing it, Joe, we're just, you know.
That was very good.
Poo-pooing it?
Yes.
Yeah. You like that one?
Given that we'd be testing.
Just a
whenever
slight too
can't explain your jokes and expect them to be funny.
Anything else on water and sewer?
No, I move the acceptance of the water and sewer board report.
Second, by Sydney, all in favor?
Aye.
Watershed Supervisory, as you know, they're meeting twice a month. The idea originally was the first meeting, which would always have been the first Thursday of the month, would be really dealing with sort of the water inspections, the septic inspections, et cetera, and then they would really focus on HABs the second, but they're really kind of commingling it and feel kind of the need to do so. So these are the minutes from those two meetings. I will say that, you know, since Al mentioned, you know, spoke at our public comment today, I have brought up the concept, the law, which was like a 1985 law establishing the Watershed Supervisory Committee, does create it as a 5-member board. The village appoints 2, the town of Springfield 1, Otsego 1, and Middlefield 1. The only municipality actually that uses an elected representative has usually been Otsego. And actually it's been good because you know, certainly attended a lot of town of Otsego meetings, board meetings, and that because the trustee is making a report, Watershed Supervisory Committee is on that agenda and they kind of get versed in what's going on in that. Do I think it's mandatory that it be a trustee? I think we've got some very good people on that committee right now. You know, it is right now, they're definitely fighting off a lot. They've essentially applied for 3 grants. One, as you recall, the village funded a grant writer for a CFA, Department of State, basically 9E plan grant. They worked with Soil and Water District, and they put in one for tributary monitoring. And also, we've been working on a Appalachian Regional Commission. So I said, I would have been glad if you'd done 1 grant this year. So they have really bitten off a lot. They are very eager to try and address some of the issues we've been having in the lake. But this law does have, the last section of it is 285-13 fees. A fee which may be charged for each routine wastewater system inspection shall be set by the Board of Trustees of the Village of Cooperstown. So it is us who can set it. I did ask for sort of a recommendation from them. They came in at, you know, maybe $100 or so. I want to gather a little more information. What is key to remember is that many of these inspections only have to occur every 5 years. Once your system is up and running, they'll give you a certificate that you're compliant. We're going to check back with you in 5 years. So every 5 years, a property could incur whatever that fee is, 100, you know, 200, whatever. The other thing to realize is that for 20 years, it really became active that we have a watershed inspector, Al. We had a watershed coordinator who for like 18 years, 19 years was Win McIntyre until he retired. And now we're contributing to a scientific advisor for that committee. But those costs have always been borne by the village, 100% for those two positions. And I always say, and there aren't septic systems. We have a municipal wastewater system that we just spent $8.4 million to upgrade. So we've really been doing the yeoman's task, and a $100 or $200 inspection fee would go a little way toward reimbursing some of the costs we've incurred on it. So I'm just versing you on that. It's not super popular, I will say, with some people, but I think it's maybe a long time in coming and should be considered by this board, so if you would promulgate something. Then we have the franchise agreement with Charter, and I will tell you that I really don't remember a lot of this when it was signed previously, so this one would be, I noted it was a term of, what is that term? So I was assuming that the other one that was now expiring or did expire, it says the granted for 15 years, which is probably why we didn't, none of us were here sitting around this table 15 years ago. This came obviously via email, and Jenna has the notice for public hearings, so any decision on this would be made, if we just make the motion tonight to set a public hearing for our September 25th meeting. I know I have a few questions on it, and Cindy, I know you did as far as moving things off the polls. I thought one thing that would be relevant to us is that gross receipts. How much does the village actually get on that? And if you look at your budget, we put everything in that gross receipts that comes in. That's Time Warner, there's Google Voice. I didn't even know we were getting little municipal fees for that. Some of those are like 6 cents and it comes. Spectrum Charter is the largest of our gross receipts revenue. Last year, our last fiscal year, we had $36,686.54. They pay quarterly. They're nice checks. That is like 65% of all our gross receipts revenue, a little bit more. We got 59,000 was our grand total. So, and that's coming from a myriad of companies, but Spectrum is definitely our largest. So there's that. And I think we'll go ahead, and if there's a motion, we'll set the public hearing for this at our September 25th meeting. To consider the approval of a cable television agreement between Spectrum Northeast and the Village of Cooperstown. And again, this is something they have to do with every municipality because they're traveling down our streets to string their wires or wherever they're going.
So you're advocating, I'm sorry for interrupting, but advocating accepting what they propose?
No, we've got to set a public hearing. I think then we would make a decision, and do we put any, and I would like to know now if there are any requests that we should reach out to Sam Parker, the Director of Government Affairs, so he could be apprised of that before the public hearing. Something may come up at the public hearing from someone, and so, no, it wouldn't be, we just have to set a public hearing.
So,
but I know.
How do we have a public hearing if we don't know if we're willing to accept? There is a state entity that'll help us with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That comes in, and I know I think I mentioned to you at one point in the village of Owego that I represented 27 years. We were in kind of a similar boat. That thing came in 20 years ago when I was village attorney there. And we were like, well, how do we get, what's our input? Do we take what they're doing? And as it turns out, we put in a broadcast system at the school. So they were broadcasting every day, the kindergarten or the elementary school, what was going on, and they agreed to do that. And we also had the rate increase. It was kind of remarkable what we received. All I'm saying is, if
No,
we set
so
the
who is
public-
the government entity we should be?
I'd have to, that would be a stretch from my mind, but I remember we were referred to this committee, it was under Public Service Committee, and their job is to help municipalities negotiate franchise agreements. And they were awesome in their,
I bet you NICOM has something on that.
or could tell you
Yeah.
who it is.
So we'll
Because
reach out to
If
NICOM.
we set a public hearing, I mean, what are you having the public hearing on if we don't want to have it to accept the contract? We might as well find out if they're under offering this first, and then say, well, we're not having a public hearing to approve this till you are a little more generous in your offer. And this is just me speaking, I'm not a trustee and I shouldn't.
You know, I have to
said
say, I thought it was just setting, much like we have a public hearing for any law, but it doesn't mean we're gonna approve that law.
Well, but what it does mean that the law, if we change what we notice, aren't there conditions then that we have to have another hearing?
Yeah, so that we wouldn't do this agreement. Yeah.
So, yes, and I think, you know, in terms of infrastructure choices and so forth, I haven't digested this by any stretch of the imagination. I admit, this requires some expertise to understand.
There is a committee that does it.
All right, so I will go to NICOM, because I'm pretty sure they've given, they have,
Experts.
they've given seminars at NICOM on this, and so we will see about public franchise agreements. But Cindy, you had something in particular, and that had to do with.
Yeah, so both our Pioneer Alley and Hoffman Lane projects, we talked about the possibility of burying the overhead wires and moving them to underground, which would really make the appearance of those areas so much better. That means contacting each utility separately. We have started that process with NYSEG, but I would like any sort of agreement we reach to include at least an investigation and possibly the implementation of buried spectrum cable.
Right.
A what?
Buried spectrum cable on those two municipal sites.
On those two at least, yeah.
Out of curiosity, who owns the poles throughout town? Is it the
Nice.
electric company?
Nice,
Is it?
it's supposed to get.
Yeah.
Although apparently the rule is last one off has to take the poles off.
Yeah.
I keep hearing that, I don't know if it's true.
I don't know whether it's true either, but I keep hearing it.
If they're burying it?
But we were told that by several places when, do you remember, some of you might remember, we had double poles going up Main Street, from about the stoplight up towards Mohegan.
It's nice up there.
Yeah, well, it was a double pole, and finally, they disappeared one by one, but it was incredibly difficult, and it got down to just one wire on that original second pole, which was shorter. But NYSEG, who owned the pole, kept saying, well, they're still on there, so, you know, it was trying to negotiate with like 5 carriers was fun.
So anyway, I was excited to see this in our packet because it's been on my list to try to figure out how to work with Spectrum on this, and there it was.
On the Pioneer and Hoffman.
Yeah.
Well, any others, so think about these components of it. I'll reach out to NICOM, see what I can figure out, and you know, about who would potentially negotiate on behalf on that. It's probably the village attorney, I would think.
I mean, I don't mind doing it, it's just I do know there is a committee And I'm not sure, Richard, it's quite what you found, but it's, I think it was under the Public Service Committee, and they're taxpayer funded, and their job is to assist municipalities.
All right. Great. All right.
Can I make one comment about the watershed supervisory committee? One of the things that Wynn did in the past is produce tremendous minutes. That was a skill that he had. I find these minutes hard to follow, and I'm not blaming the minute taker. I don't know that they really signed up for this job, but if we do think about a fee going forward, one thing that maybe that could help fund is it.
Traditionally, when it's one meeting a month, it's our deputy clerk. And so it is still the deputy clerk who helped with these minutes.
Okay.
So that has been recognized, they're aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I said, this is a legal thing.
Yeah,
You know, if you are telling a property owner that that their system is not passing and they decide to sue or take other action, these are legal documents, and I agree, and they are aware of that.
Okay.
All right,
This
so,
is a question he wants answered.
just as a reminder, our next breakfast with the board is the morning of September 25th. At 8 a.m. And our next trustee meeting is September 25th. And I will now make a motion to go to executive session for a contract negotiation. Second by Richard, all in favor.
Are you concerned that our next?
Thank you,
I
legal
don't
service.
think that's needed
Absolutely.
for the executive